I think everyone understands by now that's been listening to any episodes that I'm not just an experiencer. I am a magnet for weirdness, whether I want it or not.
It's your chief best quality, I think.
Yes, exactly. And so a number of things happened to me that I will be sharing in various episodes coming up that at the time they happened, I had no realization they were connected to the formula. It was only later when my daughter had finally found it that I had a realization that several strange things that happened were connected to this piece of paper that had been missing around my house for decades.
Okay. Of course, I was there when it was written, and we looked at it extensively when we had it at Dark Skies. We showed it selectively to a few people, and then it went into that missing time hole. Okay. And when it came back out, I thought I remembered what it looked like, but I was surprised. It was clearly the same thing. It was just this little piece of a bank envelope with this writing. It's clearly the document. It is that. But I had sort of in my brain, things have been diffused over 30 years, and suddenly they got very specific. And so I think both of us were made to feel like this is something we can do business with now. We have the internet. We have 30 years of contacts that we didn't have before. We have the ability to discern what might be there. So we set about doing that, which is the right thing to do. And the truth is, people are going to disagree. For example, when we are going to do a show about the envelope, and I may dispute your CERN connection. I may have my own connection, right? It's a Rorschach test in some respects.
Absolutely.
By the way, I'm not saying I am disputing. I'm just saying as we continue to think about it, and because we've called this thing an active investigation, that what sound, light, and frequency is, that means we didn't want to jump to a conclusion and just put it up and then let every person on the planet start to argue about it and diffuse it. We want to present it in a rational way where we can say, here's what it appears to say. We've talked to this person, that person. Maybe we'll do a panel, whatever. So here's the plan, folks. This is what we've discussed. You can put this on your calendars. September 17th, 2026. That is the episode where we are going to talk about the envelope, show the envelope, disclose the envelope, because it's the 30-year anniversary of the week that it was written over in my backyard here. Okay. And so we're going to talk about it. And at the same time, we may have a panel, maybe the two of us. We're not sure what form that show is taking because we've got 35 others we've been producing, right? It isn't that simple. But one thing I can promise you, you will see it. It will be on that day placed not only in the show for you to look at, it will be available widely. You'll be able to go to soundlightfrequency.com and look at it. You can share it. You can give it away to people. You can put it on a t-shirt or a coffee mug if you want at that point, although that sounds like a good idea for us. But anybody will be able to do whatever they want. And I want to just point out the precedent for this. A year before that formula was written, while we were producing the Dark Skies pilot, at my house, I received 2 postcards. We did a whole episode about it called We Are Watching You. And these postcards came out of nowhere. And the first one, literally in all caps, in dark ribbon from a manual typewriter, said, "We are watching you." Freaked us both out. Okay. And during the preparation for Sound, Light, and Frequency, in the same way that the envelope has turned itself up, those postcards were found in the boxes that I had going through. But if you want to look at them right now, folks, you can go to soundlightfrequency.com. There they are. You can look at them. So if you want to know what the precedent is for what we're going to do with the envelope, same thing. Same way you can go read the envelopes now, read a discussion about it, go to the episode about it. You will get that on the envelope. That's about the best explanation and promise I can make, that we're not sitting on it. We are actively investigating it.
Yes. And I will also make the promise that when you hear the rest of the stories connected to it, it will give you a much deeper context to how to see it. Yeah. Because I do feel that not only is it a Rorschach test, and based on people we've shared it with, people have come back with very different interpretations. So we already know this for a fact. Secondarily, one of the stories I will tell is that I believe it also acts as a talisman. And we've talked about this before. Bryce, you had a great quote about the more you stare at the phenomenon, the more it realizes it recognizes you and stares back, right?
Yeah.
I think for everything that we've talked about, the formula and JC were part of a phenomenon that were around dark skies. This thing represents the phenomenon in some form or another. And one of the stories I will be telling is one late night when I was researching it, my whole world unraveled. Now, is that a coincidence? I don't know, but I'll tell you the whole story. And that's just one of the things that connects some dots that need to be understood and processed before you actually try and make sense of the formula yourself. I'm Brent Friedman. Have you ever wondered if there's a secret connection between Hollywood and UFOs?
I'm Bryce Zabel. You're listening to Sound, Light, and Frequency.
We are halfway through season 1, and you've got a lot of questions.
We've got our share of answers. We'll be offering them up now. Let's get started. It's been a wild ride here at Sound, Light, and Frequency. And even though those of you who are listening or watching us may not be aware of this, we're kind of celebrating as we get into the halfway point. The other thing that's been happening, though, is that we're getting a lot of new audience because iHeart is doing a pretty massive marketing push for us, which we appreciate. And we've had some high-profile appearances on other people's podcasts. And we are very grateful to all those people and all their new listeners that have sampled us. And so we think it might be appropriate at this point just to take stock, look back at what we have already done and the story we have told so far in Sound, Light, and Frequency, evaluate what all that means, and then talk about where we're going into the future for the rest of the run here. And in particular, we thought one of the things that would work so well for us is to answer some questions, because we get a lot of questions on the various platforms where people are allowed to leave comments, but our own website has a place where people can write in and ask us questions. And of course, there's the YouTube expression of the show where people aren't afraid to leave their comments. So yeah, we get questions.
It's a blessing and a curse. It's wonderful to get these questions. Some of them are very thought-provoking. And by the way, just to point out, sometimes we're getting comments. Sometimes people are sharing stories with us, and
Right.
It's fantastic. It's really amazing to think that people are trusting us with their personal stories. So please keep those coming, and we're responding as fast as we can to them. But with regards to the questions, I think both you and I have been trying to, on different platforms, going in and answering things where we can. But it's that queue that just keeps filling up. So I think that's what motivated us here to take a moment and look at the questions that keep recurring, the ones that have come up multiple times. Obviously, there's an interest in those answers, and we're going to try and provide it.
We should probably do some version of an Ask Us Anything at some time that's live and coordinated, but we're not that sophisticated at this moment as we're doing this. So folks, what we've done is everything we're going to talk about today is based on a question somebody asked, but what we're not going to do is say, now Joe in Pacoima has a question for us about this, that, or the other thing. We grouped them together into the things that come up over and over. And Brent, I don't blame people for having questions, because one of the things that we started to do is to tell the whole dark skies experience story from the get-go. And that's a complicated thing. We've referenced this television series that you and I created together for NBC these many years ago. And that's the number one question. The number one question expressed across the board many times is, where can I watch dark skies? So that's a softball. It's maybe not the best answer, but it's a softball. I'll let you answer it.
For those of you who are lucky enough to get a copy of the DVD set, that's your best bet. Unfortunately, it's out of print right now, out of stock, but there are occasionally copies on eBay and other kind of secondhand sites and Amazon. But there are also a few places that you could watch it online, but those are not technically sanctioned places to watch the show. We also have some clips if you just want to get a sense of it. If you have heard of it but never seen anything from it, we do have some clips of it on our website. Unfortunately, there's no great answer for it. There are ways for you to see it. The other thing that we're hoping is that Sony takes note of the fact that there's a bunch of people that want to see this show and comes around at some point and relicenses it for streaming, puts out what would be amazing as a Blu-ray set, a definitive collection, but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
First of all, let me break that down. Yes, there are clips at our own YouTube site, which you can access very easily at hollywoodufos.com, we made that one as simple to roll off the tongue. It's even easier to get to than soundlightfrequency.com, although that also has a bunch of clips on it. As for the DVD set, in 2014, they released a wonderful DVD set produced by Shout Factory. That is the prime way to go because there's all these Easter eggs in it. There's a documentary that's 2 parts, each one about 40 minutes. So it's like an hour and 20 minutes of documentary on the show. That's frankly not us tooting our own horn. It's somebody else writing it. So it's kind of interesting. So I would tell people that would be the primary expression, but by all means, sample the clips if you want to get an understanding of it. But that leads me to the second question, Brent, which I'll ask myself right now, which is people that have gotten past question 1, which is, where can I watch this Dark Skies? There's a subset and a sidebar of people that say, wait a minute, so you guys made this movie called Dark Skies, but you're talking about a TV series. What is that all about? Okay. So yes, Dark Skies was an NBC series created by Brent and myself back in 1996. We aired 20 hours of programming. That's the one that we're talking about finding the DVD set for. It's Dark Skies, and the DVD set is called, I believe, the Declassified series under Dark Skies. And yes, there is a Dark Skies movie, which when it came out in 2013, I don't know about you, Brent, I got a lot of people complimenting me saying, hey, fantastic. I guess you've got a movie called Dark Skies out right now, and you must be very happy about that, raking in the cash. Not really. There is a Dark Skies movie. Brent and I are not part of it. In 2013, I believe Dimension Films, do I have that right? I believe Dimension Films made a movie starring Kerry Russell that is called Dark Skies and is about alien abduction. And that is not our movie. Someone else did that movie. We are not telling you to watch that movie. It's a fine enough movie. We're not putting it down, but we were a little, at the time, all I can say is it's confusing. And we tried to stop that confusion when we heard it was coming out. And we asked Sony, who has our Dark Skies, to please talk to these other producers and say, maybe you could come up with a different title for your thing. And they didn't do it. So now we have this confusion. And the irony, Brent, I don't want to go too deep into this, but the irony is the reason they did not change the title is that Sony didn't want to push the producers because they were afraid of a powerful producer named Harvey Weinstein, who was the producer on the other film. Today, I would imagine they'd have a little less concern about that.
Yeah, as in zero concern.
As in zero. So we hope you can watch it. And by the way, I would just want to point out, Sound, Light, and Frequency is not solely about Dark Skies. Dark Skies is our spine, if you will, for talking about the relationship between UFOs and Hollywood. Some episodes go deep into it. Some episodes may not mention it at all. But as we go through this order of 36, our goal is to tell a large, over-encompassing story. And that's what we're all about.
Yes. Let's jump to something related to Dark Skies, because a question that came up a lot, and rightfully, is about JC. And in fact, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this one of those questions you always hate when you see on like a high school or college test where it's like multiple questions within one question. So the questions are, is JC still alive? Do you know if JC's still alive? Do you know if he was actually a man in black, like maybe not human? And do you know if this whole thing was just a psyop?
I think we should answer first is, who is JC?
Yes. And so it's all part of the, what do you know about JC at this point, right? You told us about what happened at the party. You've told us about the second meeting you had where you rejected the deal. But what do you really know about him?
I need to underline that we got people joining us right now who have heard us talking about things, and they're like, oh, I'll go listen to Sound, Light, and Frequency. And you're like, what are you guys talking? In 1996, on September 21st of that year, we had a party here at the house that I'm recording from right now. And during that party with 200 people in the backyard there to watch the show, a young guy about 30 years old approached both Brent and myself, said he'd been sent from the Office of Naval Intelligence, and he wanted to offer us a deal that would be cooperation. They would feed us information that was true, and we would help reflect that in our show. So that's who JC is. So these questions are built on top of that. But
yes,
go forth.
So let me throw out, unfortunately, there aren't any answers. The answer to the question is, do we know the truth about JC? No, we don't. Do I know if he's still alive? No. If we did, we would happily share that information. The question that I think is most interesting is, was this a psyop? Right now, given everything that we've experienced, everything we know, the state of the world right now with regards to disclosure, looking back on it all, do we feel that this was a legitimate offer by an actual agent from the Office of Naval Intelligence? Or was this some sort of weird psyop, either by humans who had their own agenda or some potential real men in black who might have been not human or non-human intelligences that were trying to steer us in a certain direction? Obviously, there's no way of knowing in particular, but I do feel that the more that we have studied this topic, the concept of it being a psyop is a strong possibility. I think we're seeing today how even when a president says we're going to disclose everything, stuff comes out, but it tends to muddy the water and everyone's confused about what's the truth and what's really going on and what's the agenda. And everyone's screaming on some different level psyop. So I think we have to look at it and say, yes, it's possible that people were just messing with us and that they were getting us to perpetuate a story. The one reservation I have about that, and this actually is going to lead to another question that people have, which is the formula that he gave us.
You know what? Can I weigh in on the PSYOP thing before we go deep formula? Because that's going to take us down a river of questions itself. Okay, Brent, here's how I look at it. And it was interesting to hear you just say what you said, because I can't disagree with you. Of course, we have to say there is the possibility it was one big PSYOP. At the same time, I think that we have something we didn't have 30 years ago. We have perspective. We have more knowledge of what has happened in the real world, of disclosure, et cetera. We've had a chance to evaluate how we feel about it. We've had a chance, at least speaking for myself, well, no, it's true for you too. We've both kind of gone away and come back to thinking about it. So we kind of have a fresh mind. While I'm certainly open to saying there is a distinct possibility the whole thing was a psyop, you still have to say, from whom? Who would try to psyop on this level? Because again, as we talk about the various things that happened during this dark skies experience, they were anomalous, weird, strange, and somebody, some force, some group, somebody was behind them. We didn't make them up. They actually happened. So therefore, somebody was doing something. And with my 30 years of thinking about this and obsessing about it, to be honest, for the Sound, Light, and Frequency podcast, I think you also have to say there's a distinct possibility the whole damn thing was on the level. Now, I'm not saying it was on the level. I'm saying I was more doubtful in 1996 when it happened that it was on the level than I am now. Everything I have learned in the last 30 years leads me to believe that it could be exactly what they said it was. It could have been exactly that the Office of Naval Intelligence, which was in a fight with the Air Force about how to deal with this incredible problem that we are now seemingly grappling with in today's world, that they sent out people to talk to people in the entertainment business. And the reason I'm way more willing to believe that is partly because of the story you told about how Toby Hooper told you that Steven Spielberg told him he'd been approached. I'm not saying you and I are Spielberg, but if Spielberg had been approached, and if two lucky guys like us had a TV series coming out on a major network where they were spending 40 million plus talking about the things we were talking about, I might want to talk to those guys too. If I had to bet, I wouldn't bet my house on it, Brent. And I probably wouldn't even bet your house on this. Okay. But if I had to bet a small amount, I would probably bet that I go with on the level over PSYOP.
What's so fascinating is that when it was playing out back in 96, I was all in. I absolutely believed it was happening. I took everything at face value. In the intervening years, seeing how much disinformation seems to be out there and how many seeming psyops there are, part of me wants to believe that it happened, that it was real, that people felt our show was so important that it should be used as part of Slow Drip disclosure. There's something that makes it feel honorable. And at the same time, though, I look around at all of the disinformation out there, and I remember something John Harrington said to me, which was, it was a multi-billion-dollar initiative to have propaganda out there and counter programming. And I just think it's a strong possibility. I literally, our positions have reversed over time.
They may have. In my younger days, went to the University of Oregon and got a degree in broadcast journalism. And one of the things they drilled into us is you can't bring up something if you don't tell people within the context of the show you're doing what you're talking about. So yeah. I want to go back to the PSYOP thing. But first, I want to just say, you dropped a truth bomb in there on us with John Harrington. You better tell us who he is for all the new people who, again, have just found us, because God bless our friends in the podcast world who have talked to us about our show on their own shows. New people that are sampling may not be aware of Harrington. So let's give them Harrington 101.
So when I was 18 years old, I was invited by a family friend, someone that I grew up with when I was a kid, who had become part of the Reagan administration in 1981. I was just out of high school. I was between high school and college. And he offered me a kind of summer job to drive his family's cars and dog and some other stuff from their garage back to their new home in Langley Farms, Virginia. And we grew up on the West Coast. So this was a cross-country trip. I'd never done anything like that before. I took a couple friends. We did the trip. I'm just going to cut to the chase, which is I hadn't seen this man who I revered. He was a real male role model for me growing up. I hadn't seen him in a number of years. And when he came home that night, he came home with Secret Service agents in a black Lincoln Town car, his briefcase handcuffed to his wrist, all of which raised a lot of questions in my mind. And they weren't answered until everyone had a big dinner. And then he and I moved out onto the back veranda, and he told me about what he was doing. And he proceeded to disclose to me that he had been briefed in an underground facility in West Virginia for a number of months. And the line that has launched 1,000 clips on YouTube and Instagram was that he used to cry himself to sleep every night. And the reason being that this was not the world that he thought he was bringing his daughters into. What he ended up telling me was that aliens are here, they're real, and he's seen them. And this led to a whole conversation that if you are interested, you should go back and watch episode 4 of The Man Who Cried Himself to Sleep to get the whole story. But that's the gist. His name was John Harrington. He was Undersecretary of the Navy. Then he additionally went on to become the Secretary of Energy in Reagan's second term. And there's some evidence that he was quite high up in ufology, behind the scenes, whoever's pulling the strings and running the show. He seemed to know a lot. And go ahead.
The journalist in me is going to stop you there and say, okay, what have you learned recently that makes you feel more confident that John Harrington was telling you the God's truth when he told it to you in 1981?
A couple of things. Recently, there's been some behind the scenes discussions and activities of people within Washington, D.C., trying to get in touch with John Harrington. They seem to believe my story and are quite interested to hear his story. Whether that has happened, I don't know. I'm not involved in that per se. I think also, Bryce, you and I did some research and we found an underground facility in West Virginia. Mm-hmm. I think it was the Greenbrier Resort, which on the surface is an actual resort. But beneath it was a whole secret enclave and one of the primary kind of emergency bunkers for a lot of VIPs in Washington, D.C. Almost like a whole underground city was beneath this resort. And it was only in the late 90s that it was opened up to the public as a tourist spot where now you can go see what that underground bunker looked like. So I think those two pieces of evidence that there were people in Washington that were quite aware of John Harrington and were interested in speaking with him. And the fact that something he told me actually at the time, I didn't know anything about West Virginia and I didn't know anything about underground facilities. So the fact that checked out and there actually was one, I think that gave a lot of credence to his story and to my story.
By the way, when you were talking about that, I thought, what would be a great sound, light, and frequency giveaway would be we have some kind of raffle or something where we give a tour of the Greenbrier facility so people could see where John Harrington might have been. And by the way, apparently there's another underground facility in West Virginia. I guess they were popping up everywhere. So unclear which one. Look, I take a great deal of pride in my friendship with you just hearing this because, again, for folks who we are recommending that you, if possible, listen to the Sound, Light, and Frequency show in chronology, because episode number 1 is called Party Crasher. That is about the JC character coming to this party. And then the number 4 episode is The Man Who Cried Himself to Sleep, which is about John Harrington. And it does help to arrow your way through it. You can drop in anytime at any place. We don't care, but it's if you want that full experience. So yes, Brent told me this story in 1994 when we first met, before Dark Skies was created. And in fact, it kind of led us into the relationship that led to the creation of Dark Skies. Now, recently, though, a couple of things. In 2023, when David Grush was in my house and told his story for the first time to Ross Coulthart as a test practice, I did ask Grush if he knew John Harrington, and he said he did, but he didn't offer any more information about that. And then later, just last year, Ross Coulthart called me saying that David Grush was looking to get in touch with you, Brent, which apparently has now happened. So all of this, I think, for people who want to go back to that episode number 4 and listen to the long version of the Harrington story, you should take it not with a grain of salt. You should take it as what happened. Okay. It's the evidence, the preponderance of evidence that is exactly what happened. And that's why Ross Coulthart, who I used to host Need to Know with, has been following the story. He talked to us about it when we appeared on his podcast. I understand he's still talking about it when we're not on his podcast, right? It's a big story for him. And people have said to me, going back to the questions, I get the question, why are you favoring Ross Coulthart on the John Harrington story? And the answer to that is we're not favoring it. We're favoring Sound, Light, and Frequency. We've told the full story here first, but we're not favoring Ross. Ross has been most interested in following it. And as far as I'm concerned, now that we've told our version of it and you've gone into deep detail, Brent, it's a jump ball. Anybody else that wants to talk about it, they want to interview you, they want to call you, they want the details from they should go ahead and do it. So no, not favoring Ross or anyone else. It's an item of some great interest right now, and people should talk about it, which is kind of a long way, Brent, but it takes me back to episode number 1, Party Crasher, JC, and the other question people ask, which is, where's the envelope and why won't you show it to me?
I'm going to pull a Bryce and say, before we get to that, I want to go back to Harrington for just a second.
Oh, please.
Because like you said, it's a topic that's out there, but I also want to answer some of our audience's questions that came up, which is, first and foremost, am I still in contact with John Harrington? I have not spoken to John in decades. My mother has been in contact with his wife. I know John is in his 80s, and I hope that I do get to see him again at some point. Another question that has come up that's harder to answer is, what do you think specifically made him cry himself to sleep every night? Now, Bryce, we've talked about before the nature of disclosure, the concept of ontological shock. And so we don't need to go deep into that rabbit hole, but I do want to just resurface something that I said in episode 4, and I'll restate it here because it's particularly relevant today. And that is when I asked him why this truth hadn't come out or why it wasn't going to come out anytime soon. He said to me, Brent, this is a God-fearing nation. If you take that away from people, everything could unravel. Now, what has happened just recently? As this new wave of presidential disclosure was coming out, apparently several persons were dispatched to go have private meetings with pastors to warn them what was coming down the pike and to get their flocks prepared for some theological, ideological disruption. That's exactly what John said to me. And John, by the way, was a Calvinist. He was religious. So when people say, why would he cry himself to sleep? If your entire belief system is shattered, your identity is tied up in your belief system, then you are left with the existential question of, who am I? What do I believe? What is this world? And I think that's a heavy bomb to drop on people. And obviously it affected him. I think the one other thing to consider is, and we've referenced it before, the idea that several people high up in the intelligence community have said that it's somber. The truth is somber. I think anything that impinges upon our free will, that if there are aliens and they are in any way in control of things to some degree, then it raises the question, if they're in charge in any way, then what freedoms have I lost suddenly as a human being on this planet? So I think those things are, we don't have any evidence that's what's coming, but that I would believe, knowing John, goes back to his inability to protect his daughters from an impending truth that may actually remove their free will to some degree, or his ability to protect them.
His daughter's got a hall pass then on that, because it's been 40 years, 45 years, and this ontological shock that he might have cried himself to sleep about didn't happen in that time. It may be about to happen now, but it hasn't happened over that period of time. I have a couple of Harrington questions that I've collected here that I'm going to ask you. The first was, do you think JC was sent by Harrington?
Yeah, I've seen that question. Wow. Talk about a psyop.
Boy, that is a layer upon layer. That's the multiverse of psyops.
As the writer in me, the Hollywood writer in me, I go, oh, that's a great twist. I did not see that coming. But it's hard to imagine. For me, I think in particular, knowing John the way I felt I did and that I do, the thought that he would psyop me in that fashion is hard to swallow. I can't say it's impossible, but it's hard to imagine.
I would ask you to look at it this way, though. I don't think John Harrington said, yeah, let's go get Harrington and that crazy partner is. I don't think that happened. But let's remember also, Harrington was the Secretary of the Navy. And the people who came to us said they were from the Office of Naval Intelligence. So I'm not saying that Harrington sent them, but there may be a sort of center of gravity that he was part of and that the JC approach was part of. Here's the other question that I just found online that was very interesting. Brent, if you had a chance to see Harrington again, somebody calls you up and goes, look, it's critical that you go to John's house and have lunch with him. Okay. And you show up. What's the first thing the first thing you'd ask him would be, how are you feeling, John? It's good to see you again, or something like that. But what would you want to know from him, knowing what you now know and what he told you then and the time you've had to think about it? What would you want to talk to him about?
I would want to go back and replay that conversation that I had with him and go down a checklist and say, specifically, what made you cry? I would also want to ask him, when I mentioned the notion of this alien thing being such a huge deal, you said the equivalent of, oh no, this was only day 3 for me. I would say, what else were you briefed on?
That, by the way, is the other big question. Because I even did a double take when you said that, because I remember the first time you tell me the story and it was months being briefed, or maybe you had a specific day number, but it sounded like months when I first heard it. And then when you brought that particular specificity out, oh, that was day 3. Okay, 57 more days. That's a lot of briefing. What in the world were they briefing him about?
And back to the question, were you crying because of aliens and anything related to aliens, or the other 57 days? Right. Yeah. And so I think that's what I would home in on as once we got past the pleasantries and the catch up from being apart for decades.
I just want to do a little quick sidebar, because the Harrington issue, you brought it up. The whole disclosure angle is what's happening right now. With Spielberg's Disclosure Day movie and the government releases and all that. So I continually get a lot of either personal mail or people online saying, hey, you keep writing about, they're talking to me. They're like, you keep writing about disclosure. Where do you think we are on it? And by that, I think what they mean is the very first project I ever did, Official Denial, was basically a discussion of disclosure. It was about, there was a reporter trying to disclose what was really going on embedded in that. And then when we did Dark Skies, Brent, we said, actually, even before Dark Skies, I put disclosure into a Lois and Clark episode. And then when we did Dark Skies, we really refined it. We said, we got John Loengard, our main character, and we got Frank Bach, who is the guy that's in charge of the cover-up for Majestic 12. But what was, for me, powerful and compelling about dark skies is that Lone Guard's position was the people deserve the truth. And Bach's position was the people can't handle the truth. And the reason I thought Dark Skies was compelling is that they were both right. The people absolutely deserve the truth. And it may also be true that we can't handle it, which is what led me to my latest things, which was After Disclosure, the book I wrote with Richard Dolan, which was 100% disclosure. And then Need to Know with Coulthard, an investigative reporter trying to disclose what's really going on. And now back with Dolan on Need to Know, saying, what did we get right and what did we get wrong? Here's my answer to those people who ask me where I'm going with it, but more what do I think is going to happen if indeed we are getting disclosure? And whether they also want to know, do I think that's happening? Mm-hmm. And the answer to that part is I do. I actually do think that it may not be easy. It may be very messy. It may not happen on the exact timeline that you're thinking it should, because it certainly hasn't happened on my timeline. When we were doing Dark Skies, I was saying, well, I hope this happens in the next decade or so I can be here for it. And I'm an older man now, and I my time frame is compressed. I wish that they would get to it, but I actually think they are. And I don't think that everybody agrees that we should do it. I just think it's happening anyway. So I do think it's happening. And for the people that say, that want to know, do you think it's going to work out? I think two things. I have a bifurcated thought about that. The first is, at the beginning, it will seem to have gone better than we thought. In other words, instead of just sheer ontological shock and nobody's going to work and people are jumping off buildings, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that this slow drip thing that started with us on Dark Skies with the O&I people seems to, I don't know that it was a plan, Brent, but it sure seems to be an arc. And that we have slow dripped ourselves, if you will, into a place where people are aware of it. I was at a fundraising event last night and people at my table had no problem talking about it, wanted to know what I thought and when it's going to happen exactly and how it's going to happen. So I think it's going to happen and people are going to go, oh yeah, didn't I see Spielberg's movie about that? Or yeah, I listened to a podcast called Sound, Light, and Frequency. They were talking. I don't think people are going to initially freak out, but I do think that disclosure, the way it's gone down with the slow drip, is going to be unleashing of larger forces, because you can't be a little bit disclosed anymore. You can be a little bit pregnant. Yeah. So it's going to raise all these new questions. The media, which has been somewhat asleep at the wheel over the years on this, is starting to wake up. And while the media is not as powerful as it used to be, there's all the alternate media. And I do think a lot of rumors are going to go around that are going to be scary as hell. And I can see Harrington's point of view. I'll finish my answer with this. I've always enjoyed Dr. Strangelove, and I always loved George C. Scott's Buck Turgidson, who, when asked about nuclear war, answered this way, but I apply it to disclosure. And he says, I ain't saying we're not going to get our hair mussed. Okay. I ain't saying that. We are going to get our hair mussed. And frankly, Brent, I'm happy that we're both alive. We've had these experiences together and we can talk about it. So that's my answer to that question, which is it safe to go back into the envelope now?
Yes. I was going to say we've forestalled that long enough.
Yeah.
So in fact, let me circle all the way back to the question about whether JC was legitimate from the Office of Naval Intelligence, maybe even connected somehow to Harrington. As I said, there's an aspect of me that feels it could have been a psyop. However, the formula that he gave us, that I in particular sat on for years, we've already revealed in one of our episodes that he gave it to us with a specific request. He wrote out on a piece of paper what we call the formula, this incomprehensible thing of symbols. And he gave it to me in particular and said, in case we don't make a deal, I want you to put this in a safety deposit box for 10 to 15 years. And at that time, you can take it out and then you'll know that I was for real. Now, then he proceeded to, and I looked at it. I didn't make any sense. And I said, what is this? And he said, Sound, Light, and Frequency, Secrets of the Universe. And he left. That was his mic drop. As we discussed in one of our episodes, I think it was Unified Field Theory of Conspiracies, that 10 to 15 year period, almost to the date, resulted in a search on the internet that led from Sound, Light, and Frequency to a connection to CERN and the discovery of the God particle in 2012. God particle being a foundational element to quantum physics. Does that prove that JC was legitimate? No. It raises questions about the possible coincidence that he gave me something that turned out to have a connection to something as significant as CERN and the discovery of the God particle. So we have to say that the world is a strange place. We've talked about that before. Inside the phenomenon, logic and reason are thrown out the window. And so this all could have been an epic coincidence. On the other hand, it raises the question, if it wasn't a coincidence, how could he have known? How could he have in 1996 written out something, given a phrase, and then walked away, never to be seen again, only to be proven correct on some level, right? Then that goes to the question, was he a man in black? Was he an actual human? Was there non-human intelligence involved in all of this? We don't know. So the enigma of JC is very strange. Now, to focus on that formula that he gave specifically, that wasn't the end of the story. And part of the reason why we are, in some people's minds, stalling to reveal what the formula is, I think it's important to understand that it disappeared for years. So this raises the question, why haven't we shared the envelope with everyone at this point?
Brent, before you answer why we haven't put up the envelope, let's talk about why it went missing. It didn't just disappear into the ether. You did, in fact, put it into a safe deposit box. And then you moved from LA to where you live now, got a new safe deposit box. You and I went on about our various businesses. And I know people think that's strange, but listen, we each had careers and families. We went on and tried not to think about it again. And 25 years later, roughly, when I started to write a book, I said I wanted to look at it. And I said, Brent, show me this thing. And that's when you realized you didn't have it anymore.
Correct. There came a point where when you were writing a book and you asked me to get it so that you could put it in the book, I came to the upsetting conclusion that it was gone, that the place that I thought it had been all of these years, it was missing. There was a scramble. Boxes were checked. I went through everything. In one of the episodes, we actually already talked about this, but my daughter was home from college and you and I, Bryce, decided we should pay her $500 to go through everything I own to see if she could find the formula. And lo and behold, after a couple days of digging, she found it.
Worked like a charm.
What kids will do for $500. But suddenly we had it back in our lives. And yes, now we decided, okay, looking at it with fresh eyes after all of these years, we were equally puzzled as we were when we first saw it. But we then took the opportunity to start showing it very discreetly to a few people and getting some incredible research back on what it could possibly mean. So in answer to the question, why have we not shown it? Why have we not shared it? I think just based on that little connection that it has to CERN and the God particle tells you there's probably something going on with it. In those intervening years when it was missing, several things happened to me that were completely inexplicable. I think everyone understands by now that's been listening to any episodes that I'm not just an experiencer, I am a magnet for weirdness, whether I want it or not.
It's your chief best quality, I think.
Yes, exactly. And so a number of things happened to me that I will be sharing in various episodes coming up that at the time they happened, I had no realization they were connected to the formula. It was only later when my daughter had finally found it that I had a realization that several strange things that happened were connected to this piece of paper that had been missing around my house for decades.
Okay. Of course, I was there when it was written, and we looked at it extensively when we had it at Dark Skies. We showed it selectively to a few people, and then it went into that missing time hole. Okay. And when it came back out, I thought I remembered what it looked like, but I was surprised. It was clearly the same thing. It was just this little piece of a bank envelope with this writing. It's clearly the document. It is that. But I had sort of in my brain, things have been diffused over 30 years. And suddenly they got very specific. And so I think both of us were made to feel like this is something we can do business with now. We have the internet. We have 30 years of contacts that we didn't have before. We have the ability to discern what might be there. So we set about doing that, which is the right thing to do. And the truth is, people are going to disagree. For example, when we are going to do a show about the envelope, and I may dispute your CERN connection. I may have my own connection, right? Mm-hmm. It's a Rorschach test in some respects.
Absolutely.
By the way, I'm not saying I am disputing. I'm just saying as we continue to think about it, and because we've called this thing an active investigation, that what sound, light, and frequency is, that means we didn't want to jump to a conclusion and just put it up and then let every person on the planet start to argue about it and diffuse it. We want to present it in a rational way where we can say, here's what it appears to say. We've talked to this person, that person. Maybe we'll do a panel, whatever. So here's the plan, folks. This is what we've discussed. You can put this on your calendars. September 17th, 2026. That is the episode where we are going to talk about the envelope, show the envelope, disclose the envelope, because it's the 30-year anniversary of the week that it was written over in my backyard here. Okay. And so we're going to talk about it. And at the same time, we may have a panel, maybe the two of us. We're not sure what form that show is taking because we've got 35 others we've been producing, right? It isn't that simple. But one thing I can promise you, you will see it. It will be on that day placed not only in the show for you to look at, it will be available widely. You'll be able to go to soundlightfrequency.com and look at it. You can share it. You can give it away to people. You can put it on a t-shirt or a coffee mug if you want at that point, although that sounds like a good idea for us. But anybody will be able to do whatever they want. And I want to just point out the precedent for this. A year before that formula was written, while we were producing the Dark Skies pilot, at my house, I received 2 postcards. We did a whole episode about it called We Are Watching You. And these postcards came out of nowhere. And the first one, literally in all caps, in dark ribbon from a manual typewriter, said, "We are watching you." Freaked us both out. Okay. And during the preparation for Sound, Light, and Frequency, in the same way that the envelope has turned itself up, those postcards were found in the boxes that I had going through. But if you want to look at them right now, folks, you can go to soundlightfrequency.com. There they are. You can look at them. So if you want to know what the precedent is for what we're going to do with the envelope, same thing. Same way you can go read the envelopes now, read a discussion about it, go to the episode about it. You will get that on the envelope. That's about the best explanation and promise I can make, that we're not sitting on it. We are actively investigating it.
Yes. And I will also make the promise that when you hear the rest of the stories connected to it, it will give you a much deeper context to how to see it. Yeah. Because I do feel that not only is it a Rorschach test, and based on people we've shared it with, people have come back with very different interpretations. So we already know this for a fact. Secondarily, one of the stories I will tell is that I believe it also acts as a talisman. And we've talked about this before. Bryce, you had a great quote about the more you stare at the phenomenon, the more it recognizes you and stares back, right? Yeah. I think for everything that we've talked about, the formula and JC were part of a phenomenon that were around Dark Skies. This thing represents the phenomenon in some form or another. And one of the stories I will be telling is one late night when I was researching it, my whole world unraveled. Now, is that a coincidence? I don't know, but I'll tell you the whole story. And that's just one of the things that connects some dots that need to be understood and processed before you actually try and make sense of the formula yourself.
We want to sort of head to the finish line on this thing. We obviously could have answered many more questions, but these are the essential ones. There are some other questions that have come up that I don't think we have time to answer, but they're about a particular episode. And I would ask everyone to go check that episode out, and then we'll probably answer the questions that come from that. And that episode is the one that we just did about, called Burn the Negative, which is about how during the making of Dark Skies, the producers of Men in Black, through Amblin, told Sony they didn't want us making Dark Skies. It's a pretty rowdy episode and a painful one for the two of us to live through. So I would say, for those people that still have questions about that, for the new people, go listen or watch Burn the Negative and then leave us your comments, and we will be talking about that later. We probably each unearthed things that are a little more mundane than the secrets of the universe. And let's at least end on a couple of those, which I think might be fun. But the number one, of course, is to go back to the dark skies thing where people were, where can I stream it now? The other big question is, why don't you guys reboot it? Why aren't we rebooting it?
The simple answer is we don't control the rights. Sony controls the rights. I think if it were up to us, we would reboot it. We've talked about this over the years, Bryce. Different approaches. Would we set it in present day? Would we go back and just continue the story? Would we start all over again? There's a whole lot of ways to approach it. And I think we would rise to the occasion, given the opportunity. We just haven't been given the opportunity yet. That's why it hasn't been streamed.
People do want to, why don't you reboot it? Why don't you do a sequel? Why don't you do this? As you said, there are multiple ways to extend a franchise. I could see Sony turning it over to completely different creators than you and me and saying, you guys take a crack at it now. What I wish they would do, of course, would be to turn it over to us and say, keep going, which would be a lovely thing. Don't know, haven't been approached, but I do know that Dark Skies is on more people's radar because of this very podcast. So maybe eventually it will happen. And speaking of the birth of Dark Skies, I transferred a bunch of tapes, Brent, for the podcast, and just because I wanted to be able to have the history and put some of these clips up on our YouTube page, which again is HollywoodUFOs.com. And I came across the electronic press kit for Dark Skies. And it was like, oh my God, there's an artifact from the past. And so I put it up on YouTube and I got an instant question from somebody, which was, dude, what's up with the mullet? And it is true that yours truly has a pretty extensive mullet in this thing. And all I can say, I asked my wife about that today before we went on the air here. And I said, what was up with the mullet? And she goes, you were style conscious at the time. That's what people were doing. So I'm going to take that as the only answer. Maybe it's not the most flattering thing around, but at least it proved I had hair. I did have hair. I had a lot of it back, of course, but still had it. And I guess that's the silliest one I've got. But by the way, all those clips, we're finding them anew, and we've got them in good quality. So I'm putting up a couple of Dark Skies clips per week up on the HollywoodUFOs.com site. So people will be able to see more of it, including the mullet. So what's your crazy question? What's the weirdest silliest thing you've been asked?
I think the silliest thing that I have been asked is, are you an alien?
I've asked that myself. Are you an alien?
If I am, I have not been disclosed to yet.
You haven't been awakened like they have in Disclosure Day.
Exactly. No one has revealed that. I think it's because so many strange things have happened to me. People think that maybe I am an alien. I don't know. We'll see.
This may end the portion where we are answering questions, but let's do a little forward facing here for just a moment as we say goodbye. We do have a full equal amount of episodes to what we've just produced. And we've laid down a whole lot of story, whether it's the sort of the Dark Skies chronology / mythology or whatever you want to call it. But we've also looked at a lot of movies and ask ourselves the question, were people approached by that? Did this movie say something about UFOs or aliens that is actually true or whatever? What's your take on what we're going to be doing with the rest of the time available to us?
Look, I'm excited about some of the episodes we have lined up. We're going to be looking into hybrids and under the title of Bloodlines. That's exciting to me. I know we also want to do something with crop circles. We had a crop circle in Dark Skies. I think that's going to lead to movies like Signs. So there's some really interesting things coming up. One in particular is fascinating to me because I think it'll tie into some of my personal experiences, and that is with regards to missing time, both around abductions and really just missing time when you enter the phenomenon.
It's interesting that you focused on missing time, and I can't wait to hear that story. But what's interesting as well as sort of a UFO film / historian of this whole thing, for our missing time episode as an example, right before Betty and Barney Hill were abducted, the Outer Limits did an episode called The Bolero Shield, which people claim inspired Betty and Barney Hill to think that they might have been abducted. And then, of course, a decade and a half later, they made a movie for NBC about Betty and Barney Hill called The UFO Incident. But guess what happened then? 2 weeks after the UFO incident gets on the air, Travis Walton and his gang claimed they saw a UFO, and Travis says he was abducted, and that led to Fire and Sky, the movie. So one of the things that we want to be doing with our active investigation is looking for these connections.
Yes.
People haven't always made. Now, here we've just connected two abductions, two missing time abductions, Betty and Barney Hill and Travis Walton, but we've connected them through Outer Limits, through the incident, through Fire in the Sky. So we hope to be doing a lot more of that. I have just a couple of ones that are sort of on our work list here that make me interested in doing. And one of them would be to talk about how the two different comic franchises, Marvel and DC, which have made extensive movies and TV series about aliens, how they approach aliens differently. And as you know, I used to work with Stan Lee, and I had extensive conversations with him about aliens and UFOs. So I'm eager to tell those stories. And then we also are going to do an episode where we take on rock stars who have claimed some kind of UFO abduction event.
And there's a number of them.
Yeah. Tom DeLonge, of course, is the most famous current one who's all over this. But my personal one is I love the John Lennon UFO sighting from 1974. And I'm eager to talk and tell that story. And of course, the envelope. And we probably will throw in a Dark Skies reunion or two. And there's just all this stuff. One of the things I know that we've talked about too is I think our title for it was The Middle Ground Between Light and Shadow, to talk about the Twilight Zone and the Outer Limits and the very different ways that they talked about UFOs and so forth.
Very different.
Yeah, lots to come.
So let me conclude with what is going to be one of my favorite episodes in the second half of our season. We're going to do a sequel to All About the Woo, which was very well received. Some great engagement, some wonderful comments. This time we're going to be exploring things like missing time, out-of-body experiences, lucid dreams. But while I have everyone's attention and we're thinking about the woo, I'm just going to give you one little story, a personal story that doesn't really fit anywhere because it's just so strange. But for anyone that actually listened already to All About the Woo, you'll remember the encounter I had with the witch rider, the old hag. It took place in a duplex that I was living in the middle of LA back in the kind of the mid to late 80s. That experience was quite startling and scary once everything was known about it. And it really kind of shook me up in certain ways because I had other strange experiences in my life, but nothing quite so aggressive as that. So living in that apartment, you can imagine after you have an experience like that, anytime at night you hear a bump or you see a shadow, you're always on edge because now you're thinking, is it me or is it this place that happens to be haunted? A couple months after I had my witch rider experience, I was sound asleep one night, and my roommate at the time was in Santa Barbara staying with his girlfriend. So I knew I was home alone except for me and my cat. And at about I think it turned out to be around 3 a.m, I was awoken by a voice. And as it described in my witch rider experience, it was a voice that came into one ear only. And it wasn't an audio voice. It was more just a telepathic or psychic instruction. And all the voice said was Brent, quite emphatically. And it woke me up out of a dead sleep. And I'm in a dark room looking around. I don't see anything. I think, okay, that was weird. I was just dreaming. So I put my head back down. A couple minutes goes by. Brent, a little louder, a little more emphatic. And now I'm sitting up in bed. Okay, I wasn't dreaming this time. Someone is calling my name. My first thought was, oh, it's my roommate. He's outside the window. He's locked himself out. Maybe his girlfriend got in a fight and he's back home sooner than he thought. I get up out of my bed and I look out the window. There's nobody out there. That's strange. So I crawl back in bed and I'm thinking, what is going on? This is just so weird. And as I'm sitting there wide awake, I now hear for the third time, Brent. And I suddenly notice that out in the hallway, my door is slightly ajar into a long, dark hallway with no windows in this duplex. There are a pair of arms floating in the dark, completely illuminated. And it's strange, but the arms are wearing a short sleeve shirt. So just a little bit of the orange sleeves are showing on each of the arms. And they are floating, disembodied, out in the hallway. It's 3 a.m. I'm looking at my night clock and it's, let's say 3:05 a.m. These arms are just floating there and they start to move very slowly at first. And what they're doing is I recognize, but I can't interpret, it's sign language. They're communicating some form of sign language, which I've seen in movies, but I don't know sign language. I just recognize that's what's being used. And I'm staring at these arms, and they keep doing kind of this repeating pattern of there's a message that's trying to be imparted to me that I don't understand. And the arms just keep going, and slowly they start getting a little faster. Now they're moving a little faster, but it's the same message over and over again. And I'm looking at these arms transfixed. And by now, a minute or two has gone by, and I'm waiting for something new to happen, something else to happen, but it's not happening. And now I'm starting to feel both frustrated and oddly self-conscious. And so I say out loud, I don't understand. And the arms stop for a moment as if they heard me, the arms, and then they start to go even faster with the same message, as if faster is going to help me understand. And this goes on for another minute or two, and the arms are moving very fast. They're blazing with this same message. And now it's been 3, 4, 5 minutes, and I'm feeling very anxious, and I'm getting a little bit scared, like whatever this entity is wants to communicate something with me, and I can sense its frustration.
Hey,
and at
you're
what
just
point
not getting it, Friedman. You're not getting it.
I'm not getting it. And the paranoid writer in me, of course, is thinking, at what point do the arms just give up and come flying at me and grab me by the neck and start choking me because I'm such a lunkhead and I can't figure out what the message is. And so as this continues on, anyone who's had an experience with the phenomenon, something that's that intimate and in your face, knows that the longer it goes on, the more anxious you become, and everything starts to build up, and there's a tension, and it's like the engine in your car when it's redlining, right? It's like peaked, and you just start to realize, I can't take this anymore. It's too much. And so I realized by now the arms are going so fast, it's almost a blur of motion, like an impossible blur of motion, like something speeded up when you're fast forwarding, like on a videotape. And so I'm thinking, I have to stop this. It's been 5, 6 minutes now. And all I can think about is to stop it. I need to get out of my bed, move closer to the arms, and turn on the light to my room. And I'm an adult at this point. I don't know that I've ever been so scared in my life to move 4 feet. I couldn't do it. It took me several more minutes to just screw up the courage to slowly reach out of my bed and flip on the light. And when I did, everything disappeared. It was all gone. And I was so worked up, I don't think I went back to sleep at all. And it wasn't until about 2 nights later when I heard the same voice again, Brent. And this time I did not look at my door. I turned away and I went back to sleep. And that entity, that whatever it was, never visited me again.
I thought the second time it was going to be the entity doing the Macarena or something, which really would have been the jokester phenomenon. That's a wild and
totally inexplicable story that goes nowhere.
Listen, that's a great story to end on. One final thought for our friends who are watching us right now. For those of you who have been with us for these first half of our episodes, thank you so very much. And we appreciate you telling your friends. We love it when you hit subscribe or follow or leave a comment or just comment on social media or whatever. That's really useful and it's wonderful. And we so appreciate you for doing that. So thank you. And for the new people who are joining us, we really do appreciate that you've found us. And we want to be worthy of everything that you might get out of this show. So we're going to continue to work as hard as we have on the back half as we have on the first. And again, I'll just leave you, if you want to catch up fast, you start at the beginning and rock it through. And we don't even care if you listen to them at double speed. Just we're happy to have you. So Brent, it's been a wild ride, and maybe not arms in the hallway wild, but it's been wild enough, and we're not done yet.
Nope. This is a great moment to catch our breath and race for the finish line with some incredible episodes and stories to tell.
We'll see you all in the future. Bye-bye.
Watch the skies.
Soundlight and Frequency is an iHeart podcast produced by Stellar Productions. It's executive produced by Nick Johnson, and for Stellar, Jackie Zabel. Our show's music was written by Anna Stumpf and Hamilton Lighthouser. And your hosts and executive producers are Bryce Zabel, that's me, and Brent Friedman. Watch the skies.